Hello and welcome to the Ghibli Rewatch series of the Overly Animated Podcast, where we'll be going through every Studio Ghibli movie chronologically from the beginning. I'm Dylan Hysen, and today I'm joined by Michelle Anderer.
Hello.
And April Collins.
Hi there.
Yes, it's the Ghibli Rewatch Podcast. Join us in rewatching or watching for the first time all the Studio Ghibli movies now that they're available for streaming for the first time ever on HBO Max in the US and Netflix in the rest of the world except for Japan. Canada's getting added too, which is very exciting soon. We will be having new podcasts every Wednesday as we go through the whole catalog at overlyanimated.com. I'm a Ghibli expert. We'll be joined by people with a variety of Ghibli experience. This week we're talking Kiki's Delivery Service. Very exciting.
Yay!
Make sure you've seen this movie because we'll be getting into full spoilers for all of Kiki's Delivery Service. We'll be vaguely referencing other Studio Ghibli movies, but it's okay if you've not seen other ones. You can watch, if you're watching along with us, watch subs or dubs, whatever you want. We'll be primarily talking about the subs, although there's probably some dub things to get into with this movie. But whatever you prefer in terms of watching. So let's get on to Kiki's Delivery Service. Very exciting one that we've arrived at here, although all these early ones very exciting. Kiki's, though, we're in 1989, 1 year after Totoro came out. Already Miyazaki has his next film being released, and this is a big one. This is Ghibli's first major box office success in Japan. I know that's such a tricky phrase to say. It was the highest grossing film in Japan in 1989.
Wow.
And I think we're starting. That'll start to be a recurring thing, I think, with some of these later ones. This movie's very loosely based on a young adult novel by Aiko Kadano. And we'll talk about some of the differences, I think. Miyazaki started working on this movie the day after he finished Totoro. Very Miyazaki thing.
Workaholic spirit.
Yeah, originally it was going to be directed by other people, but he started getting his input onto the script, and once that happens, he needs full control. So then he started directing it. And after he's pretty burnt out after this. This is kind of the last nonstop movie in the nonstop period of his working. Like, I think after this is kind of the end to what you might call Studio Ghibli Era 1 or something. Like, they rework the studio after this to a certain extent. I know that's happened a few times, more recent times, and Miyazaki himself was like, I kind of want to retire after this movie. So this is the first of his
this is when it starts.
His a million retirements. But they restructure Studio Ghibli. He stops releasing a movie basically every year, and so then he's able to continue on to some real classics after this. But this movie itself, I mean, this has a legacy as an extremely, I think, meaningful film to many women and people, and it just potentially Miyazaki's most feminist film. So those are some big topics to get into, amongst many others with Kiki's Delivery Service. So let's get some initial thoughts on your history with this movie, and what do you think of it, Michelle?
I honestly forgot that I might have seen this movie as a sort of child, somewhere around 10 to 14 might have been the first time I really watched it. And I think that's just because it was one of the ones that more people in the US gave their children than a lot of other Miyazaki movies at the time. Like this and Spirited Away and Totoro are the only ones I can think of that most people kind of know about if you talk about Miyazaki. So I remember liking it as a kid, but I remember especially as a teenager when I was revisiting it, it was a really big deal to me just because Kiki's she's being so independent at such a young age, and it was just so nice to see the movie not shy away from the harder aspects of trying to, do a job and be kind of on your own and not have the money to buy anything but pancakes. Or be disappointed when you don't feel like the thing you used to love feels good anymore because it's your work, it's your job now. All that stuff just feels so relevant. And the fact that she's a girl's a big part of that too. Cause in a way, I know when I was younger, especially in high school and in college, I started getting really stressed out about thinking about how I was going to like live post school because so much of my life had been structured and school based. And I literally couldn't imagine how it was going to feel to live on my own and have like a job. And I think like in its own way, Kiki really helped because like that's a kind of, you know, visual reinforcement of like, well, Kiki's making it work. And like, maybe she's not like a real person, but her struggle is very real. And her working through all this and like, you know, she gets so frustrated at times. Like, I love that they don't shy away from like her range of emotions and that it's not like this beautiful, simple thing, which she's doing. And that honestly like helped me a lot, like get out of my own head. So I love Kiki. She's such a great character. The movie's so good. It's very much her movie. And Tombo's just kind of there supporting her and having awkward interactions with her, which is wonderful.
Okay, I didn't think you'd mention Tombo in your initial thoughts, but there we get to talk to Tombo. That's awesome to hear, Michelle. Kiki's real in our hearts. That's what we can say. Yeah. Okay. April, we haven't heard you before in this series, so also in addition to your history with Kiki and what you think of this movie, also what's your history with Studio Ghibli movies?
So with Studio Ghibli movies, I'll start off with that. I grew up with a lot of them. Obviously, like Totoro and Kiki, Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke. I grew up with so many. Pocoroso, I remember watching that as a kid. And with Kiki's in particular, so me and Kiki are the same age. And
isn't Kiki perpetually 13? So is that how
so is April. That's what she means.
Yeah, I'm perpetually 13. No, it came out in 1989, which is when I was born. Okay. So I like to think that me and Kiki are the same age. But I just have like the fondest memories of watching this movie over and over again with like my best friend growing up. Her name was Tommy, and we would just go to her house and we'd be like, "Oh, let's watch a movie. What do you want to watch? I don't know. What do you want to watch? I don't know. Okay, let's watch Kiki's." And then we'd watch it and be totally content. Like, so, or like if we were going on like a long car trip, her family had one of those cool vans that had like the VHS player and it had the screen and everything. So we would just watch Kiki on whatever road trip we were going on. So that's, I guess, my history of it. This is my favorite Ghibli movie. So I watch it every year on my birthday. Whether I'm with people or by myself, it doesn't matter. I watch it on my birthday. I remember like a couple of years ago, I went and like it was in theaters on my birthday. And I was like, I'm buying a ticket to this. Like no one else could go with me. I went completely by myself and I had the best time. And then it was hilarious because like one of my coworkers was sitting like a row down or so. And he was like, "Is that you, April?" And I was like, "Hey, what's up?" And he's like, "Are you here alone?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's my birthday." And he's like, "Okay, well, let me buy you like a beverage." And I was like, "Perfect. Like, you don't have to do that." But so yes, this movie is very near and dear to my heart, specifically because I guess the time that I started mostly watching it, I was literally like the same age as Kiki. And so I just remember like connecting with her on so many levels because I've been very independent like from that age and before. And so I was just like, look at this girl. She's going out there in the world and she is making it happen. Like, and like, there's like so many times in my life where like watching, like when I doubted, I guess, like what was going on in my own life, I was like, yeah, but like Kiki moved away from her family. I can do the same. Like, so just finding like the strength and I guess someone that I very much relate to. Like, I think that me and her, I think I'm a little bit more friendly than Kiki is, or I've always been a little bit more friendly, but like, I would still have like crazy like moments inside my head where I would just be like, don't you think it's rude that you didn't introduce yourself? But yeah, and I think it's just it's so like empowering. Like as I'm as I'm now older and looking back, it's just a very like empowering like film because, you know, this 13-year-old girl is going out into the world and leaving her family and finding her own way. And she succeeds. And yeah, it's not easy, but she does it. And that's incredible. I think that's an amazing message.
That's awesome. So yeah, April's favorite movie. Very excited to talk about all the reasons why. I think you hit on a lot of really great stuff already. I echo watching Kiki at a young age. I think this was either the first or second Ghibli movie I ever saw because I think this and Spirited Away, like actually, yeah, like when I was a actual kid, I think my family got these from Netflix. DVD, like physical DVDs from Netflix. That used to be a thing.
Old school Netflix.
Yeah, I think this is one of the ones we got from that. So this was one of my first experiences with Studio Ghibli, probably anime in general, I would say. But yeah, this was big in the US, I would say, in the mid 2000s, whenever the dub came out. It was a pretty big movie. Definitely one of the most popular Ghibli movies of that time, and I think it's probably still one of the more recognizable ones. I think I didn't have, like, when I was a kid, didn't have quite the connection to this movie, which I think you two and a lot of other people have. I mean, I think it makes sense. I had less of a reaction, you know, a young boy watching versus a young girl watching this movie. So I was really interested this time when revisiting the movie to, like, try to get into all the reasons why this is such a special movie to many people, and I'm going to focus a lot on that when we're talking about it. I really like this movie. I really liked rewatching it. I think it's like really, really good in the beginning. There's a little bit like the last third or something maybe slightly loses me a little bit, but I still think it's great. And I love, the ending. Love Kiki herself. I think that's a character that gets better. Like the more you analyze her and stuff. Like I think there's a lot of really great things about Kiki to talk about. I think she ends up being probably one of Miyazaki's best heroines. I think it's a great movie, really strong, like fourth Miyazaki movie we're covering. I mean, it's really hard to compare any of these. They're all really excellent so far and will continue to be, getting into them. So yeah, I think I want to start what I was talking about with the introduction to Kiki, which was in kind of my thoughts on Kiki, which is like why this is a special movie, because that's kind of something that just comes up whenever we've mentioned Kiki kind of throughout this history of this podcast, or just seeing people in general talking about it. It is a really special movie I think to a lot of women and in general to a lot of people. And I think like we could analyze all the aspects of why this movie is so feminist, and we will. But to maybe more generally, like what is it about this movie, I would say, for you guys to start with personally, and you guys talked about it a little bit. But if you could kind of try to distill, like, what's so magical about Kiki for you kind of personally, maybe versus other similar movies? Michelle, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it became more apparent the more I watched it. But one of the things that really stands out about Kiki as a movie is it has this attention to detail about like the awkwardness of being a girl of a certain age that like I never would have expected, but so good. And just to give you an example, like towards the beginning when Kiki's like walking down the street, I think she's like delivered, like she's feeling good, like she's feeling confident. Gigi's with her, and then she sees these three girls who are about her age, and they're like city girls, and they're talking and laughing together, and like her mood completely shifts, and then she makes like a comment right after it. She's like, I wish I had something pretty to wear. My dress is so ugly. And that kind of thing is super relatable, but also is not something you see highlighted a lot. Like that kind of like, you want to fit in, you're intimidated by other people, you feel kind of awkward, and sometimes your response is just to like negatively think of yourself and want to change. Like I think especially like her being 13 has a lot to do with that. But that kind of moment's so good. Or like when Tombo is in the car full of his friends and he drives up by her and is like talking about her to them And she immediately gets very turned off by that because, like, for her, it's very embarrassing. She's, like, put on the spotlight. She didn't ask for that. She doesn't want to feel different. She's afraid these other kids are judging her. Like, all that's communicated so well just from, like, the way they interact with each other. And I love that Kiki's, like, given the space to be, like, really uncomfortable in those moments or frustrated in those moments and handles it the way a 13-year-old would. And that creates a lot of the, like, minor but, like, kind of through-line conflict of her and Tombo, especially in the movie. But it's, like, so, like, yeah, they're 13 years old. This is how, like, that would go. And I love that they spend so much time dealing with all that because it helps it feel like a lot more realistic, kind of, like, as realistic as, like, a movie about a witch who, like, flies and does delivery services on a broomstick could be. It's, like, the touches like that feel like they really went the extra mile to make it feel more representative of, like, teenage girls especially. So, yeah, for me, it's, like, really moments like that, or just, like, when she's, like, you know, feeling depressed, and, like, there's that meme moment of when she kind of just, like, falls face down on her bed and just lays there because she's just so tired. And she is thinking about all these things and she isn't quite sure what she wants to do with herself. And it's like, even letting her just be that, like, tired and kind of depressed and a little listless is something that, like, is really nice. Because a lot of movies seem to have this, like, urge to just, if it's a young girl character, she's, like, gotta be the voice of wisdom, or she's always gotta be, like, peppy and upbeat, and she's gonna change other people's lives. But, like, really, it's, like, Kiki's figuring her own stuff out, and that's a messy process, and that's more realistic.
I love that point that this movie does not shy away from having Kiki display negative emotions.
Yeah. Yes. It's a big deal about, like, why,
like, yeah. It makes her human.
Exactly, yeah.
Because not everyone's going to, like, live perfectly in a set mood, and I think that's something that helps, like, everyone relate to Kiki, not just, like, young girls, but for, you know, like, guys as well, is because, like, she is only human. Yeah. And so, like, and yeah, she's a witch and she naturally stands out. But I think, like, everyone feels that way too, is that, like, we all feel like we naturally stand out, even if we don't, or, I mean, because we're all different. And so, like, she has, like, all of her, like, very, like, I say human moments, like, whenever she is, like, getting ready to, like, leave her home, she, like, turns to Gigi and she's like, yeah, I know we said that we were going to leave, like, next month, but what if I meet a cute boy and fall in love and get married? Like, like, I, like, that moment's just, like, great. And then she even, like, you know, she brings that up because, again, she's a teenage girl, and that's, you know, something that's on her mind at that age, or on anybody's mind, really, is like, oh, like, getting a girlfriend, getting a boyfriend, doing, you know, trying to fit in with friends, trying to make friends. So I think that that's, like, the biggest part about Kiki's appeal, is just because she's so relatable to everybody. Like, she's not perfect. She makes mistakes. She, you know, falls flat on her face or hits some trees or whatever. So
it probably hits a lot of trees.
Her inability to fly very well is one of my favorite things about Kiki. Like, her flying style is so all over the place, but that's part of her charm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Like,
and yeah,
even though she's not, like, and that's something else too, is that even though she's not, like, the perfect character, she's not the best, you know, at flying on a broom, but she's still doing it anyway because she likes it. So
mm-hmm.
Yeah, this related point of generally Kiki as a believable, like, character, or, like, a real, like, person, seemingly. I mean, in terms of the negative emotions, compare it to, like, any, I feel like, modern anime female protagonist, you know, like, I feel like they're always peppy, and it's kind of like a trope, but just the negativity, like, that Miyazaki allows Kiki to display in the movie is I think incredibly striking compared to modern media. And in a certain aspect, one of the most, I feel like, feminist aspects of Kiki is just showing the wide range of emotions. I want to bring in a quote that ties into this. I'm going to be referencing Susan Napier's Miyazakiworld book throughout this, and she has a related passage about Kiki, and also generally an introduction to some of the broader things about the movie. She says, this mixture of detailed realism and fantasy elements gives Kiki its particular strength. Miyazaki had already made a name for himself by creating strong female characters in Nausicaa, Laputa, and the previous year's Totoro, but none has the intricate mixture of traits that makes Kiki such a believable character. We see her express a range of emotion, from the positive, such as childlike enthusiasm, simple joy, and sincere gratitude, to more complicated and often negative feelings, embarrassment and shyness, and enemy and despair. Paradoxically, The Young Witch is one of Miyazaki's most human characters, and the movie itself is one of the director's most heartfelt coming-of-age stories. And we'll talk about it being a coming-of-age story. But yeah, this point of the range of emotion she displays, I think, is a really good one. And I think that's tying into a big reason of why you guys found her, maybe what you guys have said about finding the movie special is Kiki is a believable character. April, like, I know you've touched on a lot in your introduction, but any other kind of like big reasons coming to mind why this movie is so special?
I think something else to be said is not only, like, all of the characters are pretty enjoyable as well, not just Kiki herself, but like Gigi's, funny, has his moments, but yet is, really sassy, but still supportive. Like, Osono is great. I wish she could adopt me.
Yeah.
Like, even like Tombo isn't like a terrible character. He's just like a really supportive, like, male human in Kiki's life, or friend, I guess. They're friends, even though Kiki doesn't like him for like the majority of the movie. Seemingly, yeah. But so I think, like, besides Kiki, like, it's a nice, like, story that you're able to just be dropped into, like, and quickly catch what's going on as well. And it's like a believable story too, like, and I don't know, like, it's not complicated, and I think that's like what's appealing about it, is because then we get to have like such an amazing lead character in Kiki. So, and just exploring like her journey as she leaves home, finds out who she is as a young witch in modern society.
Yeah, you're right. It is a simple story, and it's kind of like very character based, I would say. This movie. I think what April is touching on kind of brings me to another kind of related topic. Here's another quote from Susan Napier. She says, over the years, Kiki's stories become a touchstone for many young people, particularly but not exclusively girls, who see in her adventures a fantasy template for their own development. While Koriko's architectural beauty beckons the romantic traveler, the heart of the film lies in the satisfying and diverse web of relationships, almost exclusively with women, that Kiki develops. Mm-hmm. As in Totoro and Laputa, Miyazaki creates an idealized community, but this time he places it in the city. So briefly on that last point, kind of two topics, I think this plays into a common topic we've been talking about in the Miyazaki set of tropes of the supportive collective. We talked about that, Michelle, I know, at the end of the Castle in the Sky pod, but I definitely think Miyazaki, Kiki's kind of like web of relationships she develops with all the deliveries she's making and those supporting her definitely like fit into this supportive collective mold that Miyazaki seems to really idealize and portray in a lot of his movies. April mentioned kind of all the people Kiki interacts with. That's what stood out to me a lot on this rewatch, I feel like, is so many female supporting characters that could easily not be there, be male, or just not be there at all. And I feel like it's shocking how many characters Miyazaki and this is true of all of his movies, but maybe this in particular, how many female characters he has prominently and a wide range of people that he portrays. It's like the fact that it's just like never happens with male created properties. I don't know. It's almost unbelievable that Miyazaki constantly does this movie in particular. I mean, and to make it more impressive, here's another quote from Susan Napier giving, I think, context to to the book, maybe that's a different quote, but she says Kiki is fortunate for having many people around to help her, whereas whereas the original novel largely centered around the interesting or amusing objects Kiki had to deliver, Miyazaki's film concentrates more on her social encounters with the residents of Koriko. Most of the male characters she meets are disappointments. In contrast, the female characters, which she elaborates on a little bit, but I don't know, is Tombo a disappointment? I think in many ways. In contrast, the female characters, with the exception of some mean girls who make fun of Kiki, are helpful and empathetic. Kiki's first entrepreneurial encounters are not only with women, but with mothers, their babies, either actual or incipient. The emphasis on women and babies supports the critic Tomohiko Murakami's comment that Kiki becomes increasingly part of a network of women. The variety and depth of this network of women provides a fresh perspective on the hero's journey, showing that women can serve as something beyond the cliched wise woman role common to many narratives. Kiki's network of women. I feel like that really stands out to me from this movie.
Yes. She's got such a strong network of women too.
It's easy, because I always remembered Ursula, because of course she's gonna stand out. She's your wilderness artist lesbian. She's that friend we all want to disappear to in the woods for consolement and really good advice. But Sono's there. The amazing fish pie woman is there, and her person who just loves witches, who's also adorable. It is true that of the men we see, there's Tombo, there's the baker's husband, but he's very kind of tangentially there mostly. Yeah. He's there to show concern for her, to show off his twirling skills for Gigi, and to help his pregnant wife. But it's kind of her business. She's the one who sells a lot of the food, not him. He's usually in the bag. I mean, and there's the baby, I guess, the baby in the carriage.
So Susan Napier also cites the the hotel clerk and the policeman, who she both has negative interactions with.
Those are negative. They're very rude.
So really, her positive interactions are all with women in the movie.
Yeah.
And Tombo, yeah.
She comes around to Tombo. Yeah. Poor Tombo.
Poor guy.
He doesn't understand what he's doing is so embarrassing and insulting for most of the movie.
I think he's it's nice how confident he is of himself.
He has no sense of self.
He just loves flying things. So to me, a flying girl is his dream come true. Yeah, I think that's literally it.
That's literally okay. We'll circle back to Sambo. Here's another. We're talking about all the female characters in the movie. Here's another Susan Napier quote. If anything, Miyazaki amplifies the novel's feminist aspects, bringing out some of the most groundbreaking elements more effectively than the book itself. He does this in two significant ways. First is highlighting of the other female characters, in particular the self-sufficient young artist Ursula, who becomes a role model for Kiki at a critical juncture in her life. Ursula has a far lower profile in the book. In fact, Kadano does not even give her a name. In many ways, Ursula is Kiki's older self, which the director underlines by having the same voice actress play both roles. If you didn't know that in the original Japanese.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
I didn't either.
Not true of the dub, but in the original Japanese.
Yeah.
Another major difference, Miyazaki darkens the tone of the novel by acknowledging the cost of independence and emphasizing the loneliness and self-questioning accompanying maturation. So I think we kind of talked about that in terms of the negative emotions Kiki experiences, but also kind of the cost of maturation and growing older, I think is something we're also going to talk about. We talked about, but all these amazing supporting female characters. Yeah. So Michelle, for you, Ursula is who stands out.
Well, she always was, just because she was so in control of her own life. She was so off the grid in a way that felt really exciting, because she's doing the art she wants. She doesn't have to do errands for anyone. I don't know how she makes her money. Maybe she sells her paintings, but she loves being where she is. I feel like she probably built that little cabin herself. She's very self-sufficient. She has just what she needs, not anything more. She is friends with all the crows, even though I think they're kind of jerks, but she likes them and she can draw them, so she gets something out of it. And she's just, she's the cool big sister, and she checks in on Kiki, and she understands what Kiki's going through in a way. And that's probably something we'll talk about later, but I feel like there's a lot of conversations about like the struggle of trying to be creative in like a marketable like capitalist world. And I feel like that's something they have in common in their own way. And that's like such a good thing to kind of like bestow to someone at such an impressionable age who's looking for guidance. And she gives her really good advice. She's like, you know what? Yeah, maybe you're like kind of burnt out right now. Maybe you legitimately do need to take a break. That's what I do when like I struggle with my art, and maybe your flying is like kind of your form of art. So, yeah. I mean, Ursula's just so wise and cool, and she's just like, who wouldn't want to have that much freedom to just do exactly what they wanted in their own way without dealing with society sometimes, you know?
Yeah, is that the ideal life, being in the woods painting crows. And random witch girl?
Crows and all, yeah, you have to have crows. Part of the deal.
Yeah, that's the scene of when that you're talking about, when they come back to Ursula's the forest cabin, when they're talking about kind of comparing what Kiki's going through to Ursula's artist block. I think, yeah, that's one of the best scenes of the movie. I really love that. And the painting she's making of Kiki, it's really good. But April, what do you think of Ursula?
I love Ursula. I would date her, and we wouldn't get married because I don't feel like she's into that. It's totally okay.
She's too off the grid.
Yeah, so me and her will just live in the woods together, and every once in a while we'll go run errands in the city. It'll be great. But no, I think Ursula especially stands out amongst, you know, all of the female characters just because she's able to give such great advice to Kiki when Kiki needs it most. I think it's like something to be noted that all of the, you know, the network that Kiki has, they all give her something whenever at a time when she needs that. Like, she has a Sono who provides that like motherly support and, you know, sort of guidance in the beginning of it, which is probably what Kiki needed at that time. But then as you notice, or as, you know, events roll out, she doesn't necessarily like rely on a Sono as much, especially when she's going through her sort of bout of depression and being discouraged. And then, like, I mean, Tombo kind of gives her a little bit of that confidence and seeing how like great she is, but then she gets even more discouraged, and then like, so
it's a roller coaster.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster. But I think it's because like she needed it put into a specific way for her. And also I think it helps too that Ursula connected with her by sharing her own experience. So because, you know, Ursula's talking about her painting, which I'm going to assume is how she makes her money, because she talks about, oh, you know, like sometimes I'm just super uninspired and I have to walk away. And that's kind of what Kiki's going through, is that, you know, she talks about how like she had talked with Tombo about how like she didn't like flying as much, and because it was her job. And that's totally, you know, understandable, because you can burn yourself out, and especially whenever you're as eager as she was to start. So So I think that's just something great about like Ursula, is that she was able to give her the right advice at the right time. And it's great advice. Like, anyone can use that advice. So, but then, like, you know, she comes back and she sees the one lady with the fish pie. And
Bertha. Is it Madam or Bertha? Which one's which, Dylan?
Madam. Yeah. Yeah, I don't look up them. No, Madam, the one Bertha seems to be some like a housekeeper to a certain
Bertha's
extent.
the housekeeper.
Okay, Bertha's the really excited one who likes.
I love Bertha.
Bertha's so good.
Bertha's adorable. But okay, so after she, you know, visits with Ursula, and then, you know, Ursula gives her that talk, and I think what Kiki needed after that was just some more like, you know, positive encouragement, or another person just being like, hey, I'm your friend. And that's what she got out of Madam. So I think that she, you know, Ursula gives her the biggest part of it, but Kiki gets something from all of the women that she like interacts with.
Yeah, I agree with that. And to close out Ursula, I mean, I need to get into, I guess, a subtopic since we brought her up. And I think Ursula associates, and we'll come back to the other woman in more depth, Ursula associates to me with the environmentalism of this movie, which I think is much less prominent than the other Miyazaki's we've talked about to this point. And I think it's really interesting the way in which it is an aspect of this movie almost by absence, because this movie is strikingly urban. Compare this to most of Miyazaki's other movies take place in the countryside, I mean, his last movie just now was about going away from the city in Totoro, going away from the city to the countryside. And this movie, Kiki's doing the opposite and coming to this city. And one of Miyazaki's big themes is rediscovering the country and going back to, not necessarily anti-city, but, in terms of how it plays into his view of nature and preservation, going back to more natural settings. So I think it is very striking in this movie that Kiki, goes to the city, and almost the entire movie is spent in the city, with the exception of when Kiki visits Ursula in the forest. Ursula's kind of the forest surrogate, maybe, to a certain extent in this movie.
Well, Kiki also grew up in like a small village as well. So that would make sense too, that maybe Kiki needs to go back and sort of find her roots, is what they're kind of trying to get at it as well.
I think it's a good point. I think
going off of that, like one thing I noticed, I'd never watched the sub before until this last time, and there's a line after like the crows like yell at Kiki and are like super mean. Gigi says like, "Oh, that's so rude. You know, crows used to like obey witches in the olden days," and Kiki says like, "Well, they don't do that anymore." But that implies like a whole cultural witch like lore that doesn't necessarily take place anymore, probably from the result of just like, you know, capitalism and like cities cropping up and modernization. Like that's part of her roots that she doesn't have as much connection to anymore. So I wonder like what that could say about the fact that, yeah, like going to the forest, like maybe that is connecting to like a part of herself and like her lineage that she isn't really used to tapping into anymore as like a modern day witch.
Yeah, it's a good point bring up. So in the Her Kiki chapter, Susan Napier talks about the 3 times of this movie: the city, the urban time, the natural time, but also the witch time. Like there's also like this third
witch time.
So it's pretty, I think it's kind of, but thematically at least, you're right. There's like this witch mythology kind of concurrent to the other things that are happening thematically in this movie that makes things really interesting. But Kiki maybe connects more with where she came from, whether that's witch or natural. I do think she comes from like a less urban environment when she's visiting Ursula, connects with that. And I think like Miyazaki is probably just displaying a realistic thing that he's observed a lot of people going through in terms of going to the city. I don't think it's something he himself would espouse as we see in other movies. But he's kind of portraying this journey he's observed in women around him, and like, so we see, and so we kind of see the negative aspects of that, the crows. So Kiki is very antagonistic with the crows. Ursula very positive.
Friendly.
I think that's potentially representative if the crows are nature. Ursula is in touch with nature. Kiki has kind of lost it to a certain extent. She's very antagonistic with the crows. That's kind of the consequence of her move to the city. So I think these environmentalist themes, much more subtle in this movie, and I feel very restrained of Miyazaki to not get into it more in this movie. I think it's to the movie's benefit that we focus so much on Kiki and her interactions with everyone. But definitely still present, even in one of Miyazaki's least, overt environmentalist movies. I think there's still some undercurrents to it. And I think that's probably enough to say about that. And I like Ursula as her relation to Kiki, and also as this relation to nature character.
He's saving all the nature stuff for Princess Mononoke. Don't worry, guys.
I was gonna say, he just dipped his focus from nature into plain stuff, so he's still in his lane. You know?
That's kind of true. Like, this is the plane movie, and then we go Porco Rosso next, another big plane movie. So
he's got multiple buckets.
I guess Nausicaa's kind of the best of both worlds, maybe.
Yeah,
both
the
very
best of
prominent.
both.
Are there planes in Spirited Away? Are there no planes? We'll talk about this when we get to that movie.
Oh,
there's a train. That's machinery.
That is, he does like trains. There's a train in this movie. I love Kiki on the train with the cows started licking her feet and stuff.
It's so cute.
Yeah.
She's a stowaway.
I love it. Yeah, the beginning of the movie with just her starting to fly, and then the intro music playing, and then just you see her going everywhere. I don't know. That's one of my favorite parts.
It's exciting, right? It's just you feel her excitement and just like taking off into the world.
Yeah, I think so. I'll come back to that and talk about the music a little bit. Getting into some of the other female characters of the movie. We talked about Osono, who kind of a mother figure to Kiki when she comes. pregnant throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, she's hella pregnant. I love it. We never show pregnant women. And for how common it is to be a pregnant woman in this world, why are we so ashamed of showing it to other people? Like, what's wrong with being pregnant? It's natural. So, yeah, it's great that she's pregnant. There's nothing wrong with being pregnant.
It's great that, they have the baby at the end.
They do.
I have to admit, I always forget. I don't know if this is weird or you guys will say I agree. The baker, I always forget he's her husband.
I mean,
for some reason, I have no idea.
I always forget until the end, or right? if I remind myself.
They never talk to each other. They never smooch.
There's no reason to think that they're married.
There's no public display.
That's why it's perfect, because they keep that private. And
they do, yeah.
They're business partners during the day, and they don't have to perform their infatuation for it to be real. The pregnancy is the proof of their infatuation.
But even with the pregnancy, I still don't know that it's him.
I love.
They don't need to. That's how secure they are in their relationship.
I love how chilled in the background he is. He's just like a quiet, buff, handsome baker who kind of like just lets his wife run the show. He'll cook all the stuff, and once in a while he'll just like longingly look out the window, making sure Kiki comes home okay. And he makes a little sign for her, and he runs away when she comes in because he's like awkward about it. And then she hugs him, and he doesn't know what to do with himself. And that's like the perfect man, right? Because very sweet and kind of awkward, and just doing his best,
and won't know what to do with
especially the baked goods part. Like that's an A+ skill.
That's the important part. And it's a lot of bread there, I think.
They sell all that bread. They need a lot.
Yeah. No, I love the baker husband too. I almost want to call him a himbo, but I think he's smart.
I think he's smart. He's just quiet. But he doesn't mean he's dumb.
The scene of Kiki going to the bathroom and like when she's coming back, she's a little afraid of him.
It's real though, because I think that's like her first night too. So like they really don't know each other.
Yeah.
Susan Napier talked about that as like a very feminist scene of like they actually showed Kiki going to the bathroom. Like that's kind of like a crazy thing to show, like a girl.
Especially in that time.
Yeah.
Like this was like pre like a huge like feminist movement, and so like the world was just getting over the fact that Lucy and Ricky shared a bed on I Love Lucy. So,
let me bring a quote of the context of feminism in Japan at the time. A brief snippet of like information about that. Susan Napier says, by the 1980s, women in Japan were more likely to go to college and work outside the home, at least for a while. Popular culture reflected this, as in the shoujo manga that from the 1970s was increasingly featured powerful and independent heroines. In the discussion of Kiki, Miyazaki related her story to the young female staff members at Ghibli, noting that there is a similarity in Kiki with young women who come to the big city all alone, dreaming of making it as manga artists. So I think we're post a certain amount of feminism in Japan, at least when women starting to be more independent, and Miyazaki kind of like that being an inspiration for him, I think, in making the movie. What were we talking? We're talking about the other.
Osono
going to the bathroom.
I don't know if that was related. Oh yeah, Osono in general. Yeah, I don't know how much there is to say about her, but she's good.
I will say like one thing I really like about Osono is she doesn't like take advantage of Kiki's eagerness. Like there's a moment where Kiki's like, oh, like I'll do that delivery, like it's on my way anyway, and she's like, no, I'm still gonna pay you. And she's like, are you sure? She's like, yeah, work is work. Which again, like I know Twitter has like shared a lot because it's still so relevant. But yeah, just paying Kiki for the work she does and acknowledging that like any kind of work is worth paying for, even if she could get her to do it for free, that kind of stuff. Or when like she like kind of understands that Kiki's like having like a kind of a tumultuous like experience with Tombo, and so when she finds out Kiki's sick, she's like, okay, take the day off, like it's really fine, like I can manage without you. Also, that boy stopped by, like he wants to check on you later, and Kiki's like, no, she's so scandalized, and like Osono like understands. She's like, I'll tell him you're not seeing visitors. It's fine. Like she she really looks out for her and she supports her. even though she's like living in her place and is technically her employee. And I feel like that's part of what's really nice about the relationship. Like she's a mom, but she's also like kind of a really great boss at the same time. And I feel like that's a really good balance with her as a character.
Well, I think it helps like with Kiki's development too, is because she's like, hey, like, don't sell yourself short. Like, you are worth something.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, you know, like, I'm going to pay you for this delivery no matter what. Or like, even just like if you don't mind working, then it's still teaching her like your work is worth something. Like, working in the bakery is worth like a roof over your head kind of situation. So I think it's just a lot of like small lessons like that can be taken away from Osono's character.
Yeah, and I like the points of how supportive she is of Kiki, and that playing into kind of the supportive collective we talked about. And I think this movie kind of is inherently capitalist in terms of it's about Kiki starting her own business, but it's also it's a much more, I think, kind, empathetic capitalism that Miyazaki envisions than one that we often see in our daily lives. I think of people helping each other out a lot more, and we see that with Osono's actions towards Kiki.
Because it's also like, it's very opposite, like I'd say like the current maybe like hashtag millennial mindset right now, where it really pushes the message of like value your worth to like get what you deserve versus like putting in whatever it takes to have anything.
Yeah.
And that's like pretty important too. Like I do think like, yeah, like it is capitalist, but it's like self-respect and not just like doing whatever you can for the larger economy, but like looking out for yourself and making sure you're getting what's due to you too.
Yeah. And just taking care of like yourself, like, and not going above your means, because there's like Kiki, she has her own business. I mean, for the most part, she's, you know, staying someplace rent free. And then, you know, we still have these moments with her where she says, you know, like, oh, I'm like, I can only afford to eat pancakes. Or she's like, oh, I would really love that really like pretty pair of shoes, but I don't need those and I can't afford them. So, and then just like moving on with it. So.
Yeah, those shoes may be a Wizard of Oz reference, by the way.
Those shoes were ridiculous. I don't understand what she saw in them, but like it was the 80s. Maybe it made more sense 40 years ago. It was giant clown shoes.
And I love the emphasis. Not a giant. I don't know if they're, but
they look big.
Yeah, they were big shoes.
They could find it in her size. It wasn't literally those model.
I don't know. Those look like
they were gaudy. Yeah,
okay, maybe it was just maybe it was just them.
Gems on them or sequins. They were all done up.
Hopefully she gets them after the show, after the movie ends. I love how many pancakes there are in the, like you guys mentioned. So much pancakes.
It's all she knows how to cook, which again, like when I was saying, like this
movie
really. You
pick one thing to cook. I think it's a good
thing.
It's a really good starter meal when you don't know how to cook anything, but also just like seeing Kiki like use the money she had to purchase things at a store. Like that's such a normal thing, but it was just like so nice to see, like, yeah, I can use my money to buy things I want when I'm alone and don't have parents to buy food for me anymore. Like that's the kind of like independent stuff that seems like very trivial, but it actually feels like a big deal. Like I love seeing Kiki in the grocery store being like, okay, I'm gonna get this frying pan. And like, oh yeah, we gotta get that cat cup.
And she's like lifting the pan. Like, is this a good one?
Yeah, is it a good pan? Is it gonna last me? Because I got a budget. Like that kind of decision making, I feel like we don't see as much of with young girls especially. So it's like so like, yes, Kiki, you can only make pancakes, but you're taking this living on your own very seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of Kiki's journey of independence. That can tie into our next topic. But quickly to close out the other female characters, we talked about Madame and Bertha.
Bertha! I love that her name's Bertha. I had no idea. No one has that name. It was great.
I think she says it once in the movie, Bertha. But Bertha with the broom. The shot of her with the broom. It's like she's
so
cute.
She was gonna be waiting on Madame, but she got so excited about the broom she had to test it out in the hallway, and they like have to call her back.
And then it's like she's trying to watch TV and then turn it down. And she's so excited. Yeah.
And she's like excited while this like kind of scary thing's going on, but she's also she's like, yeah, what a good show. It's just getting good now. And it's like, oh my God, Bertha.
It's a really scandalous attitude for a Miyazaki movie that she has.
I love Bertha.
She's here for the drama. Like,
she's here for the drama. Aren't we all sometimes? We all got a little Bertha in us.
Madame's great too. She's so kind to Kiki too in terms of supporting her and what we've been talking about, and love her pie. And then she's just rejected by the granddaughter wholeheartedly.
That's so touching. One thing I think when April was talking earlier about how all the characters give Kiki something, which like I think is honestly like brilliant analysis. I didn't realize that watching it, but I think I certainly will now. I think the thing Madame gives Kiki is like a sense of like capability, confidence, because when she's like, oh, like I know how to use this old oven, like let me gather the firewood, or like let me like screw in your light bulbs, like I'm very capable of doing all these tasks
around the house.
Yeah. And like Madame really appreciates that and is kind of like in awe of Kiki's ability, probably because like a lot of young girls she knows don't do those things in their town because they don't have to, because they're at a slightly higher economic bracket and they're still living with their parents. But like, it's very nice to see Kiki taking charge and like kind of being rewarded for that too. Like that's a kind of self-confidence that I think is really nice.
Well, and also Kiki comes at it with like a positive attitude.
Yeah,
as well. She's like,
to...
let me do things around the house for you, versus like, oh, I have to do things around the house. Like just that in and of itself, like who wouldn't appreciate that? Like,
yeah, I think all of their scenes are with those two. I think are really good. And of note, a last kind of part of Kiki's network of women is there's not a major character, but there's this fashion designer like neighbor
fancy
that is her first fancy lady. It's like her first client, I think. Yeah, she pops up a few times too. You guys, we were talking about like Kiki coming to the city and her journey here, and I think like we mentioned in a previous quote, but definitely like a coming of age movie. This movie
for sure.
Yeah.
Big aspect of it, and a big aspect of Kiki, kind of like navigating her new independence in the world. And I think this ties into a lot of aspects of the movie, a lot of which we've mentioned already. Let's bring in this quote. It hits on a few things and it leads into talking about one thing with the ending, and we could get into that now or later if we want to. But here's another Susan Napier quote. She says, Kiki can be seen as relating to the fear of transition. On one hand, this fear is a form of mourning for the loss of childhood, from the point of view of a parent watching his or her child grow up, or perhaps a nostalgia from their own childhoods felt by young women office workers watching the movie. This complex undercurrent of adult nostalgia for the early stirrings of independence and sad awareness of what independence brings adds to the movie's emotional force. Intriguingly, while Kiki does recover her flying ability, she does not regain her ability to talk to Gigi. Flying above her new urban home, Kiki at the movie's end is stronger yet more limited than when she arrived, a bittersweet vision of what maturation can entail. So, loss of independence, I think, is another, loss of, losing something kind of when you're, it's a theme I think that a lot of movies hit on, of you lose something kind of when you grow up. And I think it fits in line with, even last movie we saw that, the granny, in Totoro says that, she can't see the suit sprites anymore, but she could when she was a kid. You kind of have like these abilities you have when you're young that you maybe lose when you're older. And in this movie, Gigi only meows at the end. That is in the original Japanese version, which was changed in the dub and, was now changed back. So if you're watching on HBO Max, the dub.
Yeah, they changed it.
So Disney re-released this movie in 2010. I've learned this now. And they had made Gigi talk at the end, which is not what happens in the original. But now he goes back to meowing. And they also, changed the songs back to the original Japanese songs in the beginning and end of the movie. And they took out a lot of extra Gigi dialogue because they inserted a lot of that into the movie. So they made it much more true to the original movie. And that's the version that's on HBO Max right now. So I think a lot of people, there may be some people watching that like watched it growing up with Gigi talks at the end. It's like, what are you talking about? The movie ends with Gigi not talking. Well, that was a change to the original movie, but in the original and now the dub matches, she kind of loses her ability to hear her cat talking. So I think that that's kind of an interesting theme that fits with her coming of age and what she's going through, and she's like gaining a lot, but maybe losing some aspects of youth.
It's kind of bittersweet, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of like ties into like the how Gigi, complains, I guess, that like crows used to serve witches.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting that like you can kind of come at it with like a sort of like an environmentalist standpoint where like Kiki, maybe she's not losing that like connection to nature, but maybe she's respecting it because after all, Gigi is a cat. So, and he just wants to go do cat things with that other cat. So
wants to go do cat things. That's right.
I don't know what that means, but
climbing on
other
windowsills,
balconies, and eating pancakes, I guess, and stuff. Yeah,
and meowing,
meowing. It's an interesting. It's another. I think this ending is maybe more a traditional ending to this movie. We can talk about Miyazaki's kind of weird, non-traditional endings throughout, and like Kiki goes and saves the day in kind of an action scene, although subversive in its own right because she's saving the boy. Kind of the opposite of the traditional roles in that type of scene. But I think we get maybe the most controversial thing in Gigi not talking at the end. Something that has struck many people. I was watching the Miyazaki documentary, The Kingdom of Dreams and Madness, and
what a title.
Probably, yeah. I would say out of the ones I've seen, this would be the one to watch if you only want to watch like a one movie. Like I'd recommend this one. And the director, she asked Miyazaki at one point, like, why doesn't Gigi talk at the end? And he's just like, what's there to say at the end of the movie? There's nothing to say. So that's Miyazaki's later. That's later in life, many years after this movie. But that's also an answer he's given. But I think the primary answer would be kind of like loss of innocence. I think that's what I meant before. This theme of loss of innocence that Kiki maybe. And I think it's not a huge theme of the movie, but it kind of ties into
of change.
Okay, yeah, that's a more positive way.
It's both, because you could also go at that just from like a needing to work mentality, right? Because like that's one of the things that keeps her from doing, like, the reason she didn't go to the party with Tombo is because she had to work before and it took so long and she only owned one pair of clothes that got soaked, and so she like gave up on it because it was late and she had a job to do before that ran long, and then she didn't have anything else to wear. So I feel like the fact that she's like a working kid is a big part of that too. Because like when she goes to the party, like, and she sees that girl her age who's like at a birthday party, like a normal quote unquote normal 13-year-old, and Kiki's like very much not like in that life place right now anymore. I feel like that's like she's kind of forced to grow up a little more just because that's part of what necessitates being that independent so young.
Yeah, I think this loss of innocence can tie into another theme, which I didn't put on that line to talk about in depth, but it's definitely a Miyazakian type theme that's kind of present in this movie, which is kind of hedonism versus hardworkingness. That kind of, in terms of Kiki, and Kiki's kind of this hard worker, and she has these experiences. I did want to get into this. These experiences with her peers throughout. They're often, they're not working, they're going to parties.
They're kids.
So,
they're having a good time.
And I think Miyazaki is anti this kind of hedonistic attitude, and pro kind of this hardworkingness that Kiki entails. That's very representative of himself. But I think it's one of the more interesting scenes of the movie to me is when after she's with Tombo on the propeller bike and they're in like the valley, and Tombo's friends come up and she's just like not having it. Like they're like, oh, come on with Kiki with us to the. Go on to the whatever Zeppelin, whatever it was.
Dirigible, Zeppelin.
Dirigible. Yeah. Is it the same
thing? It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. And she's very down in that moment. I find that really interesting, that scene.
Well, and also like because one of the girls recognizes her. She's like, she's the girl who delivered at my party the other night, which immediately places her as like a working girl, which is very different, and it kind of others her from their group.
Yeah, I was gonna say the exact same thing. Yeah, that she gets called out, and it's kind of, I guess, like ruins the moment for her, because it was nice that she was just kind of getting to relax and not do anything with Tombo, and then all of a sudden, like this reminder of the fact that she is, she's independent and she does have to work, and she can't just go on dirigibles or
she can't just go on dirigibles whenever she wants,
or or just go to parties for that matter too. And so it's like this reminder that she's not the same as them. Like, and I think the class issue is there as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
but that's something like I want to say, like I can kind of see where Miyazaki's coming from, and the like, yeah, it's good to be hardworking and to be like self-sustainable, like objectively, yes, but I do think we should consider Kiki had the choice to, like, this was a tradition. She decided when she was gonna leave. Like, this was her idea, and she wanted to follow through on it. But like, for a lot of people who are poor, especially like non-white people, like, it's not a choice. And if you're working that young, you do lose a lot of that same childhood freedom, but it's not something you actively decided to do for yourself. It was just kind of thrust upon you. So I feel like while we're talking about this, we should probably consider, like, choice is a big deal when it comes to that. Because, like, yeah, if you choose to have, like, a very, like, autonomous, independent life because, like, that's what you personally want, that's one thing. But if you kind of have to, that's, like, something else, Yeah.
Well, and I think there's also sort of a reminder, too, because Kiki's obviously at the beginning of the movie, she's really excited to go live on her own, leave her family, and everything like that. But then, like, reality sort of set in, and it's not as glamorous as she probably thought it was going to be. Like, maybe she did imagine herself going to parties and things like that, but she doesn't get to do that.
Yeah, it's and to the scene, I think what's really striking is, and as you mentioned, it's a good point Michelle brought up, and I'm gonna like cite Miyazaki's perspective a lot on this series, but it's definitely not something I'm necessarily espousing and supporting. But I just kind of trying to give context to the movie. But I think Miyazaki very like, you should work as hard as you can and not have any fun. Like, I don't agree with that. Like, it's just kind of his.
For sure, Miyazaki is kind of a workaholic. It does make me think of that other moment where Kiki's just like bored out of her mind behind the counter, and she sees that boy pull up on his bike and the girl get out in the dress and they like go on a date. It's kind of like, yeah, like girls your age are going on dates in their free time, but you have to work even though it's very boring right now.
And I think, like, he has this very kind of, like, anti-hedonistic attitude, but I think it's a little restrained in this movie because it's kind of, like, showing that Kiki's following this lifestyle, and it kind of is showing pros and cons of the fact that she has to work all the time.
Oh, yeah!
And that she's choosing to. And I also think, like, Kiki is allowed to have fun, I think, throughout the movie and stuff. And he approaches it more of, like, Kiki's psychological, like, aspect towards, like, the choice of going, because getting back to the scene with Tombo's friends offering to go to the dirigible with her, like, she totally could have gone. Like, that was a moment she was completely free to go. Like, in terms of the party, like, she was working and she missed it, and like she still could have gotten changed and went with Tombo even after she got back. But it's just it's that she was so discouraged, I guess, by her situation and her not relating to her peers. And that's definitely one of the most fascinating aspects of kind of Kiki's character and in general the movie to me. And I think that leads to a lot of the negative feelings that we were talking about that she's allowed to display, is her just like kind of not feeling in tune with those around her, or feeling othered. I think to a large extent, I think actually, I think you could argue Kiki feeling othered is a huge theme of this movie, because she's instantly othered by being a witch by everyone around her.
Totally.
Oh yeah, and she like further emphasizes that, but then tries to sort of rein it back in at the same time, because like in the beginning she's very happy and proud to be a witch, and she, as she's sort of like starting about, but then as life kind of comes at you fast, and the fact that the city probably has never had a witch or hasn't had a witch for a very, very long time, and it's so modern that like instantly, like I would feel like a country bumpkin if I was her. You know what I mean? Because she's never lived in the city before.
Tombo kind of says that, like, when she tells him, like, it's very impolite to, like, not, like, I forget exactly, like, April, you probably remember, but, like, when he first meets her and she, like, says something kind of snippy, like, that was very rude. And he makes fun of her, like, in a teasy way. He's like, wow, you sound like my grandmother. Like, you're so proper. Like, that's a very country bumpkin kind of attitude Kiki has that now suddenly feels out of place being in a big city.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think by the very nature of the premise of the movie, Kiki is othered by the fact that it's like you go find your town. There's one witch per town. When
Yes,
you're 13,
one witch per town. We have a quota.
You go find a town to be the one witch's town. And I think Miyazaki, like, that is a premise from the book, I think. And Miyazaki kind of takes that and, like, explores it, I feel like, to a large extent, and how that affects Kiki.
Like, throwing her in a city, like, it sounds like no offense against her mom, because I'm sure her mom had, like, her own trials and tribulations. Yeah. But, like, and because her mom did it too, but, like, her mom chose to go to, like, a smaller, like, populated area versus, like, Kiki, who's going to this massive city. And, like, even, like, I just remember, like, growing up, because I grew up in the city, but then, like, we would go, and then, like, I went to college in a smaller town, and I just remember, like, culture shock, just going from, like, one environment to another. So, I can't imagine the culture shock that Kiki's going through, like, as she goes to the city as well. Like, she probably feels, like, super traditional, and, like, I don't know. It would just be hard.
Yeah, I think so, and we can bring in the setting of the movie as it's kind of a related topic to this, the city of Koriko. You're right, like Kiki goes after it, and she's like, she wants to be in, like, a bigger city, and even though maybe it's harder, and I think maybe it's because she wants the opposite of what she's experienced growing up. Yeah.
It's kind of like a traditional versus, like, contemporary thing, because, like, traditionally witches leave, like, so she's, like, honoring those aspects. She's wearing the black dress, but, like, they may not traditionally, like, make a career out of flying on brooms, because her mom was a potions master person, it seemed.
Yeah.
So
I like potions master.
Part of the mythology, witches are supposed to have one, like, a specialty power, develop it. And Kiki's like, I don't really have one. I just like
flying.
Fly.
Yeah. So even in that sense, like, she's already sort of straying away from, like, the, I guess, like, the traditional, the values of being a witch. And, like, I think the other thing too is that, like, she's displaying, like, typical, like, regards for a girl her age as we know it. So, like, her wanting to have a boyfriend, like, I mean, maybe her mom wanted that whenever she left, but I don't think that was, like, the first thing on her mind. And so just, like, having, you know, a different set of, like, ideals and values.
Yeah, I think the boyfriend thing, I feel like Kiki, like, conceptually is espousing that, but I don't think she really shows interest towards boys throughout them. Even Tombo, I feel like she's not really interested in Tombo.
She likes the idea of it because it's part of the appeal of being older. It's like you're old enough to go on dates and parties and have a boyfriend. It's like the aesthetic of, like, what that kind of lifestyle means more than a specific boy.
Yeah, she wants the boyfriend aesthetic, but not the boyfriend.
Yes, exactly. She wants to be the kind of girl who would have a boyfriend.
She wants the wedding, not the marriage.
Oh my god. Yes.
She probably would, though. Would Kiki want a traditional witch wedding or a more city, probably more or modern city wedding? Probably.
She wants a wedding at Ursula's cabin. Just out
Ursula.
Yeah. Ursula. I feel like Ursula's too old for her.
Yeah, later in life.
It's like a few years.
They're built as mirrors of each other. I don't know if that's the way to ship, but Ursula's supposed to be specifically like older Kiki. But this city of Koriko, and for the record, only really mentioned once or twice, so it's not. If you didn't know, that's the name. Not important. But we're back to Europe here after a brief respite in Japan from Miyazaki's last movie. But Miyazaki's European fascination is on full display in this movie. A very European-inspired city. Specifically, I believe, would be inspired by Sweden, where Miyazaki did some location scouting for this movie in a few Swedish cities. But yeah, if you're following along, we're gonna have, like, a majority of Miyazaki movies at this point taking place in Europe. That'll continue next movie too. So I think the setting, but maybe a more, there's no specific time period, I think, for this movie, but it definitely comes across as, like, older.
Yeah, it's weird. When I was watching it last, I was a little confused because, like, Kiki has a portable radio, which feels like something from the 80s, but the cars look like they're, like, chonky metal cars from, like, the 60s. And so, like, it's a little confusing. Like, maybe it's like the late 70s. I don't know. But the portable radio really feels like something that's super modern. And the black and white TV, but that was at grandma's house. Maybe she just owns an old TV. It's a little hard to place it.
Well, even like, what is it? They have dirigibles, so that, that flying one time, too. Like Tombo's making a propeller bike. Like, who does he think he is? The Wright brothers.
Yeah. So I don't think that there's like a specific time period you have to know that the movie's set, and it doesn't try to give you one. But I think it's more of a traditional feel, a traditional city feeling.
Yeah,
but still modern. Well, it's still modern enough that you can understand Kiki's yearning for the modern city. Maybe that's what it is.
Well, and I think that like, even though we can't pinpoint what time it is, I think like everyone feels the same. You're like, okay, we're going from the country to the city. Like, it doesn't really matter what time in the world it is.
Yeah. It's a universal type of experience.
Yeah.
Koriko itself, I think it's a gorgeous city. It's definitely it's just striking like how much of a different I think setting it is in terms of, I would normally reference kind of the gorgeous nature visuals, backgrounds that we get throughout the movie, and you get the city equivalent of that here. So I think it's less.
You got cobblestones and thatched cottage roofs and like all of these cute little shops smushed together on narrow winding street paths, like against the ocean. Is so pretty. It's so ideal. Like, what a cute town. I'd want to live there. It's so adorable. And it feels really old, like in a nice way. In a like super charming, like brick and mortar sort of way.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are really enchanted, I think, with Koriko and the setting of this movie. And probably one of Miyazaki's more memorable European settings, but I think we can compare it, I think, to some other ones as we go along. And I was thinking of Kiki flying, I think, when talking about the setting, just because we get some of our more traditional maybe background shots when she's flying. Just a lot of like amazing animation, I think, of her flying throughout the movie.
Yeah.
It's like weirdly realistic the way she just like, in terms of how often you see her like shift her balance or like clutch onto her broom or like swerve in the air as if there's like a breeze or something, or like trying to steady her balance so she flies straight. Like, I can't imagine the attention to detail for something that doesn't actually exist. Like, how do you show someone flying realistically when no one actually flies? I feel like they accomplish that surprisingly well, because it does leave you kind of feeling like, damn, I wish I had a broomstick. I want to do this. This looks so fun, because it just looks so believable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love how flying is portrayed. Definitely like plays into Miyazaki's planes fascination and trope throughout his movies. And there's definitely planes and stuff specifically dirigible, but we see that different aspect of like a witch flying, and we see like Miyazaki's it can apply to magical flying too, I guess. All the different aspects of flying. I want to read this quote on like the background of Kiki's ability to fly, kind of related as just, I think, the best quote that I want to make sure we get in here. So Susan Napier says, Miyazaki later adds an intriguing scene in which Kiki explains to her new friend, the artist Ursula, that the ability to fly is in her blood. In the English version of the movie, blood is translated as spirit, but the rawness of the word blood, chi, in Japanese, evokes the primordial essence of her power and her consanguineous connection with her mother. Miyazaki apparently pondered the question of Kiki's flying at great length, trying to decide between the broom as an autonomously flying object and having the power spring entirely from Kiki. In the original novel, it is Tombo who tells Kiki that flying is in her blood. Tombo, who is fascinated by aviation and machinery, envies her ability to fly naturally. By transferring the revelation to Ursula, who relates Kiki's flying power to her own ability to draw, Miyazaki emphasizes the importance of the organic in relation to art and talent, and also keeps these powers within a female context. I think context for our discussion of that scene with the discussing the artist block with Ursula towards the end of the movie. But yeah, the mythology of the movie, I think, is interesting. There's not a lot to say about a lot of these things. It's kind of a basic witch mythology. But Miyazaki is trying to explore that into the depth that is satisfying to him in terms of the nature of flying. So I like how that's aspect throughout the movie. I want to get back to Gigi. I feel like we haven't talked enough about Gigi. We talked about Gigi in the ending. I have to ask Michelle, how is Gigi as a cat?
He's a great cat. He is so opinionated, and he does not hold back, and he's snarky, and he says what's on his mind, which, like, any good cat will give you that vibe, I feel. Like, there are all kinds of catitudes, but his is a very, like, tried and true catitude, just being like, I'm going to say this thing, even though it's kind of rude. And then Kiki's going to have to go, Gigi, like, that's not polite. And he just will have no qualms about it. I love him. He brings up a lot of good points about things, like when someone's rude, he'll just say so. Or like, oh yeah, your broom's nice, Kiki, but let's take your mom's because it looks way safer. I'm just going to say it. Like, he has so many moments like that. I also like Gigi picked the most amazing cat girlfriend in the world. What a beautiful lady. It's the fanciest, floopiest cat, twice his size, does not care. I just, yes, Gigi, you have good taste. I just said you can't talk to Kiki anymore. But Gigi's awesome. Like, the fact that, he never falls off that broom. And Kiki's, like, kind of a energetic flyer. And that says something, too. Like, he's figured out how to, like, coexist in Kiki's world for the long haul. And I think that's pretty awesome. Because they are, like, each other's closest friends for this whole movie. Like, they're always by each other's side. They're never really apart, except for when he meets his girlfriend. And I guess, like, that's part of Kiki's just, losing her childhood thing, too. Because, like, then she starts to rely on Tombo more and explore things on her own without, like, kind of her security blanket cat by her side. But, like, for the majority of the movie, he is, like, her one confidant. And I feel like that's kind of adorable to see because he is a cat.
He is a cat, yeah. He is a cat. I think it's definitely worth talking about a little bit the difference between Gigi and the sub and the dub. One of the biggest differences. In English, probably a lot of people have experienced Gigi being voiced by Phil Hartman.
Deep man. Yes, the deep man voice.
In one of his last roles, and I think he's really funny as Gigi, but it's a very different interpretation of this character than the original Japanese. Gigi's voiced by a woman, as cats apparently traditionally are in Japan, voiced by women.
I love that there's a history of, like, cats being voiced by women in Japan that you can easily.
I would say we have the opposite tradition. I think we default to male voices for animals typically.
Oh yeah,
that's true. I mean, I do think, like, Gigi's sub voice gives me Luna vibes for sure from Sailor Moon. Yeah, a very similar kind of, like, cat companion who espouses wisdom to the younger human silly teenage girl.
Well, I think that having Gigi voiced by a woman in the Japanese version just sort of helps emphasize that subtle, like, or I guess it's not subtle, but, like, the fact that Kiki's surrounded by, like, and relies upon so many women and has that network. So yeah, she's naturally drawn to female characters. Like, her cat's has a female voice. Her mom's a witch.
I mean, it feels significant, even though I guess Gigi still would be a male cat within the Japanese version. But
we don't know how Gigi identifies.
I don't know. I don't know if the movie explicitly says it yet. But I think just the point, major point of the difference would be Phil Hartman plays this character much more sarcastic and biting. Whereas if you haven't seen the original version, I would say Gigi is more cautious and
more practical.
More practical.
Come off more cautious and practical versus, like, I guess, a bitter caution.
And I think admittedly it's snarky. Yeah, he's more snarky and. I admit, Phil Hartman's very funny as Gigi. I think the character is funnier in English, probably, but it's not the same vibe, I think, is what they're going for. To a certain extent.
It sets a different tone, kind of.
Yeah, and what they did add in terms of the changes, they added, I think, a lot of, like, incidental Gigi jokes to the movie. They took those out in the re-release of the movie, the dub. So that probably helps a little bit, but I don't know. I think it's like valuable on its own. It's definitely meaningful. I think it's like we're talking about. We watched this as kids. I think we watched the version with Phil Hartman having a lot of quips in there. And I definitely have a lot of positive memories of that. I also I think we've moved away from this style of dubbing to trying to be more respectful of the traditional intent of the movie, which is, I would say, a good thing from our perspective.
Haven't people said that they disagree? Didn't Miyazaki even say he disagreed with that just because the point was to, with a lot of translations and dubbed lines, to make it feel more localized to the country that you're living in, so that it just it makes more sense to you. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think he did say that at some point, that he prefers the dubs for that reason.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's his stance. He'd prefer dubs. So he might be in favor of this kind of we perceive cats and animal sidekicks maybe as more funny characters, maybe as more male characters. So maybe this makes sense culturally for us to have this specific voice for Gigi. I think he'd probably not be in favor of the additional dialogue. So I think we probably arrive. We probably arrive, and it's not a huge deal. There's other more egregious dub changes I think we'll get into.
Konyo, cough, cough, cough.
Konyo, I don't know. I'll need to refresh on my Ponyo knowledge when we get to that one.
Oh man, I can't wait.
They did. I know they redid the songs in Ponyo, and then in this movie, when they re-released it, they go back to the original songs. So I hope we are going more with that trend. Speaking of the songs, we talk about the soundtrack. Back to Joe Hisaishi soundtrack for the Miyazaki movie, and I think this one is really good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Classic.
Classic soundtrack. I think notable ones are there's a lot of recurring themes again, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint what the exact track to listen to is. But if the first one, On a Clear Day, I think recurs a lot throughout. I think it's kind of maybe the main type of theme for the movie, maybe Kiki's theme. It's also in Flying Delivery Service. And then A Town with an Ocean View for the Koriko kind of theme. I really love that one too. And my favorite though is the opening song in Japanese. And the movie uses it so well. I guess I love the opening scene of her going off flying, and the song plays until she meets the snooty witch. Which I have to say, I feel like she's not that snooty in Japanese. I feel like she's
she just comes off as cool, she's already poised.
She's cool.
She knows her place
she's
in
more
the world.
cool. Mm-hmm. Maybe the dub makes her snootier, but I don't know.
It's to fit in with our culture.
Yeah, I know. We're snooty.
We're all about the snooty characters. Apparently.
The snooty witch, even though she's on screen for a minute, is one of the more memorable characters for a lot of people. I feel like
she has those amazing earrings, and her hair is so cool, and she has a nice purple dress, and she's perched so perfectly on her broom while Kiki's going up and down, just trying to keep in the air. Basically, yeah, she's so poised. It makes sense that Kiki She meets someone that she's trying to understand. Oh, well, how is this gonna go for me? I just started out. You seem pretty settled. Should I be worried? She's basically just looking for advice from a peer who's doing the same thing she's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love that scene. And the song that plays when she takes off into that point, Roguno Dengen. Love the opening song of this movie, and there's I think a lot of people like the English replacement too that was in the dub originally, and the ending song's really good too. Any specific soundtracks thoughts, or when you most noticed the music in this movie?
I think what I really enjoy in a soundtrack is whenever it enhances what's going on versus taking away from it. So I think that the soundtrack for this movie very much puts you in the mood of what's going on, but you're not whoa, listen to that music. Yeah, this song's jamming. Only when it's appropriate.
Yeah, we've been talking about Joe Hisaishi as a minimalist composer, so you're less likely to notice his tracks as you're watching. Yeah.
But I can't imagine this movie without music. So, Because I think it also, like, it fits in with, like, Kiki's personality. Like, she's very attached to the radio, obviously. So, like, music's important to her, or plays some kind of significance in her life. So,
yeah. Other tracks I have highlighted, if you want to listen to the I'm looking at the Spotify one. A Very Busy Kiki, Osano's Request, To Ursula's Cabin, and An Unusual Painting. Yeah, like the music plays over when the Ursula painting gets revealed. It's very interesting. Yeah. I'm looking over the scenes I've highlighted from the movie to talk about. We talked about, I feel like, all of them. But I want to note when Gigi has to stand in for the stuffed cat.
Oh my god, the old dog is the real
old
MVP.
dog, yeah.
Oh my god.
What do we think about Jeff the dog?
Jeff the dog is a treasure.
He's a good boy. He's the best boy.
I feel like he very much exudes that energy where, like, in his heyday as a young pup, maybe he would have tried to chomp on Gigi a little, but, like, he's so old and chill now. All he wants to do is be a really good dog. And he like, specifically, once he figured out that Gigi was a real cat, just kept him very, very close the whole time to protect him from all the family members until the moment of escape happened for real. And this line isn't in the sub, but in the dub, when Kiki is reunited with Gigi, Gigi's like, "Oh, give it to Jeff. Like, he'll do it, Kiki. He's a good dog." And just like hearing a cat call him a good dog is so funny. I loved it.
Phil Hartman, like, saying that is, like, clear in my mind once you said that. Like, yeah,
I was running through my brain as well. I was like, yes.
It's so many iconic Gigi lines. Like, it's hard to be mad at the dub for changing it a lot. Like, I feel like it is very impactful. I want to talk about Jeff the dog. Any more Tombo thoughts? I don't really have a lot of Tombo thoughts.
I think it's cool that Tombo's the love interest who's a nerdy boy. Like, I feel like it's a very Miyazaki thing to do, but it's like, usually they're really cool boys, but he's like a nerd for flying stuff and has big old glasses, but somehow is still in with the popular kids, and they're all just really obsessed with flying, and that's his niche. I just love that he's a nerd. I think it's great. More nerd, like, love interest representation for boys.
Well, he's also awkward. Like, he's human too. Like, he's not like the cool, sleek, like, has a line for everything. He's like stumbles all over himself. Like, I remember 13-year-old April was like, he's not bad. Like, I mean,
he's clumsy.
But yeah, like, he's realistic again. So, like, I can see this human being in real life versus, like, just in a made-up fantasy movie.
I think he's realistic. Yeah, I think it's questionable whether you guys are pretty quick to call him the love interest. Not a lot of romance going on.
He is so into Kiki. Like, that's unbelievable.
He's in the Kiki.
He's fascinated with her.
He asked her on a date. He wrote a little invitation that said,
I think he's more fascinated.
He got all dressed up to take her to that party.
Yeah.
And he waited so long, Dylan.
I would not say there's a big love story here. He does wait a long time. I don't know that. Okay, but classic Miyazaki. There's no
one-sided love story, but it's still a love story for him.
True. But also, they're 13. Like were they
my 13-year-old relationship
for like a week.
Yeah, exactly.
If you hold my attention for more than a week, like, you were doing good.
Yeah, I can't believe that they break up right after the credits in this
basically
movie, speaking of credits, I love the credits having all these, like, post the climax rescue scenes. And then it ends with the parents getting the letter from Kiki. It's such a sweet ending.
And she's doing okay. Like, their girl's going off, living her own life, and she's figuring it out. And they were right to trust her to do this. And it's so sweet. Also, her dad looks like he has a big nerd energy. So, like, maybe there's hope for Tombo yet.
Is that a good or a bad thing, though, the dad?
Good.
Good. I love her
Is this
dad.
who witches are attracted to? Is that,
I mean,
how
that
that
isn't
works?
really like the Kiki we see at the beginning of the movie is so much more childlike than the one we end on. Like when she asked her dad to lift her up in the air, it's like such a little cute thing. But she's like reveling in that because she's going to be gone soon. It's like her last big chance, and he can like barely do it because she's so much bigger now. But it's like a really cute kid moment she has with him. And, like, her mom helping her get dressed in the dress, and she's, like, fidgeting in it. Like, that's a really cute little moment.
Yeah. Starting to wrap up. I think I have other topics, but nothing necessarily need to done. I want to read this quote about context of witches, just for, like, for reference. Because I think
Which context? What is that?
Context? Susan Napier says, although Japanese folklore abounds with powerful supernatural females, witches are not part of its traditions. By the late 20th century, however, they'd become a staple of Japanese manga and anime. In fact, while still at Toei in the 1960s, Miyazaki had been involved in an early and extremely popular anime series called Sally the Witch. Sally is now seen as the progenitrix of many of the witches and magical girls who still populate anime and manga series. So there you go. Sally the Witch, the original magical girl.
Hang on. That's the original magical girl as a witch? That's so cool.
I know. I love
it's interesting this way.
That explains so much why like the magical girl genre is so particularly like skewed female. Like if it came from witches, that makes a lot of sense as an origin.
Yeah, I think that does make sense.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, we gotta watch Sally the Witch.
I know.
Sally the Witch!
There's a lot of... You could do a
fun show.
Does. You could do a whole another podcast series on stuff Miyazaki worked on at Toei. And like he wasn't directing yet, but he worked on Future Boy Conan's but the most prominently. But a bunch of other of these Takahata directed movies and even just a series like this too. Michelle, was there anything else you wanted that jumped out at you that we haven't talked about Kiki?
It's very pretty. It's a gorgeous film to look at. I mean, they always are, but I feel like Kiki's design feels really iconic in a way that a lot of characters don't. I feel like Chihiro's also very iconic. Her outfit, but like Kiki, like it's very simple, but like her big bow and her dress and her broom, that's like you see that, you know who it is, even if you barely had any knowledge of Miyazaki movies. Like Kiki's so iconic for whatever reason. She just really stands out.
I think that's a good call. Probably Miyazaki's most iconic outfit that a protagonist wears.
Besides like maybe Howl.
Like,
it's so
it is really simple.
Yeah.
But I think that's also something that it says a lot about, I guess, like the movie and Kiki as a person, is that they don't need to be extremely dressed up for it to have a huge impact either. Because Michelle's right. If I saw a girl walking down the street with a big red bow, plain black dress, I'd be like, "What's up, Kiki?" And they'd be like, "What's up, girl?" But we would know. Like,
it's a good Halloween costume.
It really is. It doesn't take much.
Mm-hmm.
I just had Kiki the cat move into my Animal Crossing village. I'm so excited.
A real cat?
She's a black cat.
Oh my gosh!
I think presumably a reference to this movie, although she would be Gigi, I guess, for the literal. But
they gotta
Kiki
do
the cat.
Kiki. That makes sense.
I know, it's great. Yeah. April, any other topics we haven't talked about from Kiki?
Oh gosh, no. I feel like we covered everything.
Yeah, we did a good job.
Things.
Good for us.
Yay.
Yay.
Well, like, because you know how, like, you sit down before a podcast and you're like, okay, what am I going to talk about? And so...
Such a universal experience. You sit down before you're about to record a podcast.
Or, write a paper or whatever, and you're like, what am I going to say? How do I want to say it? Like, what's important to me? And I feel like
You said all of it?
Yeah, we covered everything that was important to me. Like... And I could not be happier. I'm glad we talked about witches and magical girls, because this is definitely like, I would say this would be my introduction to magical girls and that whole experience. Because again, I grew up with this movie and like, I'm a little bit older than you guys, so
pulling the senior card, April.
like this was like one of the movies that got me into anime. So, because I was just like, I love, like, me and my friend Tommy, we would sit there and we would be like, we love this so much, we need more of this in our lives, and then we like sought it out. So,
and that's how you became a weeb.
And that's how I became a origin story. No. We can continue on now.
Yeah, I'm so glad we hit on all these things you want to talk about. But yeah, no, I think it's a good point to end on, though. It's like Kiki, I do think is a very influential character and movie for a lot of people our age and a lot of people who are our age who are in the animation industry. So I think Kiki is kind of this proto, even though she's not the first magical girl like Sally is. I think she is this early first magical girl, first anime, first maybe prominent female character, depending on what movies you're exposed to growing up, that I think a lot of people are watching. So probably very influential on a lot of people.
Considering a lot of people our age grew up with like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Okay, all guys, like Power Rangers, cool, 2 girls, like, but the rest are all guys, and the guys are the main characters. And like there's so many other shows where like there was so many like male leads and the women were just kind of there. But like for this movie to come about where the main character is female, she's supported by, you know, all these amazing ladies, it's so good. Like, I love it.
Yeah, it's honestly great, like, it makes me wonder if Miyazaki poured a lot of himself into Kiki as a character. Like, I'm sure he does that.
I definitely think so. Kiki
but like, especially just considering the whole, like, she's going through like several things at once. There's like the culture shock. There's the her having to work versus other kids her age thing going on. There's the her just being a teenager trying to figure out this new chapter of her life thing going on. But I feel like her relationship to flying, like we've talked about, being connected kind of to how Ursula views her art career. It feels like maybe a way of Miyazaki kind of tapping into just like his disillusionment maybe with his own, like, you know, passion for the things he does creatively versus like the needs of being in a market where you have to make something that's financially viable to survive, and the kind of disillusionment that comes with realizing that maybe for the first time and trying to find a balance between like, yeah, I love this thing, I might love it less because I have to work for it now. And just the amount of time the movie spends on her being burnt out about that, like, really lets her kind of wallow for a while in the frustrations of trying to figure out how to love what she does again, even though now it feels harder to do. I feel like that comes from Miyazaki. Like, I don't think the book probably, like, I'm guessing, didn't really get into that a whole lot. I feel like he totally brought that up because it felt like something he personally related to. And somehow he, like, tied that to her flying journey, like, as being a form of, like, creative expression, I guess. But I think that's really cool. I think she's better for it, like, being able to tap into that. It's more realistic.
Michelle, did you read the Miyazakiworld chapter? Like, you just literally quoted it, basically. Like, I don't know how you did that.
Book, but it sounds like a really good book.
No, you're right. Exactly right. Miyazaki's feeling burnt out right now. I mentioned in the beginning how right after this, he's like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, making a movie a year. So it's exactly his attitude. And he totally channels that into Kiki. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And he's like letting everyone else know too. He's like, hey guys.
And I think if we're tracking like who's Miyazaki's mom in the movie, who's Miyazaki, I think the answer to both questions is Kiki herself. I think Kiki is kind of so much goes into this character. I think it's representative of himself, the most important person in his life. A lot of so I think it's reflective of the characterization she ends up with. Now I want to say April. Did you mention Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because the girl is April in that show? Is that is that is that true?
Oh, I just mentioned that because I was the only girl and I had 2 brothers, and I was forced to be like, I didn't get a choice in like what I got to watch because I was always outnumbered, and so I enjoyed, you know, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers and all of that when I was a kid. Like, don't get me wrong, but like, I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
But I would always be bad because I wanted to be one of the turtles. And my brothers always told me that I had to be April. And I was like, no, I don't. And they're like, yes, you do. Because 1, you're a girl. 2, your name's April. Boom. Argument done. And I'd be like, I'm not playing with you guys anymore.
The dark sides to the April name. They come out now.
The dark sides.
The dark sides. I was
There
also
you go.
the only girl in the neighborhood I grew up in, too.
Oh, April. Oh, man. No wonder Kiki was so important.
Yeah.
Like,
So many ladies in that universe.
Yeah, I love it. So I was very happy you got into all these reasons, Kiki's. It's so important to everyone. And next up in our series, I'm surprised I had their straight not to frequently reference it, but next we have Only Yesterday. Very similar movie to this movie, but by Isao Takahata. So I think we'll be I think it's better to make all the comparisons between the two in the Only Yesterday versus the Kiki pod. So we'll probably make a lot of comparisons in the Only Yesterday pod to Kiki, and just these very solely focused female character movies on their journeys, like shockingly feminist, but back to back, both of these movies.
And
So
focusing a lot on realism, like realistic moments that aren't always pretty, but that's what makes them feel like identifiable.
That's true. That movie has a lot of negative emotions being felt too. Okay, well, excited to talk about it. So we'll be here next week, talk about Only Yesterday. Let us know you thought of our Kiki discussion. Find all the ways to contact us at overlyanimated.com. And if you enjoyed this, consider supporting us at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to all our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Beatrice. And thanks as always to our patron executive producers, Ryan, Steve, Alex, Beatrice, Hugh, Michael, Needle, and Phonician. So yeah, if you're not subscribed to our Ghibli Rewatch, iTunes feed or wherever you're listening, Spotify, so we have our specific Ghibli Rewatch feed. Subscribe to that to hear all of our upcoming Ghibli discussions. We'll be back next week with Only Yesterday. Thanks for listening, guys. See you then. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.